Hi guys, welcome back to our Porsche restoration project. In this video we're going to put together our front and rear brake calipers. We have all our parts reconditioned now, and the way I've got this all set up here, this is pretty much what I'm doing with all the components on the cars. We're getting ready to put things on the shell. I've got everything separated out in separated boxes, all the nuts and bolts, different washers and seals accounted for, make sure everything's in there. Now just keep them all together before I start my assembly process. Also on these brakes I've got some different lubricants and a Loctite we're going to be using here. New replacement seal kits from Porsche, and brake pads. These are Ate brand. And then also I printed out some paperwork here from the original manual, and this refers to our torque settings on the brake calipers, and then also we can explain this this angled stop here, and this sets the angle for our pistons so that we don't get any brake squeal. So those have to be a very specific angle to the rotation of the rotor. And then also here you can see a cutaway. So this is what's happening inside the piston chamber as it gets pressurized. You can see the black seal there flexing towards the front, and then in a relaxed position it's 90 degrees up and down. However, some of these brakes I've seen on different models, and I'm not sure which years they had a different seal in there, but some of these are directional. They actually have an angle edge to them, so if you're doing your brakes, you want to make sure that your particular year, that if you have an angled squeegee or an angled seal to it, that it's going in the right direction. And then also I got a printout here from Ate how they like to have their seal kits put back together. Okay, let me get this bench set up and spread this out, and we'll get started. Okay, getting started with the rear brakes then. So first thing I'm doing is I'm replacing the nut and bolt set that hold the caliper halves together. Even though the original nuts and bolts, they still look real nice. Black oxide still looks good on them. They're not rusted. But the manual recommends you replace them, and the reason that is because anytime you have a fastener that's under a lot of heat and stress type conditions over time, you end up with a metal fatigue, and the fastener can end up failing. And with brakes, it's really better to be safe than sorry and just replace the bolts rather than take a chance. So what I've done here is I've replaced these locally. These guys I use here in town, they have a lot of metric sizes here, but they don't have everything. These are the sizes for the rear brakes that I'm using. But the nuts I couldn't get anywhere in the US. I turned the internet upside down trying to find these and couldn't get them. Actually had to go outside the US, found these in England on eBay, and I was able to locate them from these guys. So these guys sell on eBay UK, so if you're looking for some nuts and bolts, metric, real great source to get them from those guys. Alright, and then starting with our rear piston here, so you can see that angled slot there. That's what we're going to use that angled brake gauge on. Try and set that angle just right. And then on the inside, this has all been cleaned up. And this gets a part in here. This is another part that's impossible to find. These are all in really good condition coming off the car, so I've cleaned them up, taken them apart, and what you're going to find inside is like a sleeve bushing. And this is another part that's virtually impossible to find. I spent hours and hours and hours trying to find one of these. When I took the brakes apart, inside one of these little guys here, I had one missing. So I guess it is possible that the brake works without that bushing, but really better to have it in there. So eventually did find one on eBay outside the US. Size on those are 5mm inside diameter, 7mm outside diameter, and total 10mm is your length on those. And that's the same for front and back on the brakes on this car. So what this guy does, this goes inside the piston here, and will slide down over the piston shaft. Seems like a little shaft there. And what would happen, let's say we didn't have that guy in there and we just put the piston inside the cylinder. What would happen, this would pressurize, and even though the tolerances and clearance on the side are really tight, this could jam without that. This could turn cockeyed. It could get a little bit cockeyed as it's moving and jam. So what this does, this allows like a floating guide. It just allows it to float and stay centered without getting cockeyed in there. and then the bushing just actually helps it slide up and down that shaft. So that's what that is. Even though there's not a lot of reading on these and they're very difficult to find, not much talked about on those, but that's really what they're doing, and helps to keep the pressure equalized in there. Okay, starting with our piston there, putting this guy together. So I'm taking a little bit of mineral grease. This is a red rubber grease, mineral based, and this is made specifically for brake systems and is compatible with brake fluids. Regular petroleum based grease won't work and is not compatible, so definitely you don't want to be using that. Okay, so putting just a little bit of grease on there, lubing the inside, just kind of like a primer, a little bit on the outside, not putting gobs and gobs on there. Get our sleeve bushing in there, set it down in the opening, it just kind of floats in there, and then take our snap ring, put that guy down in there. Okay, there it is. That's what it looks like, and that guy does move around in there. You see it just kind of floats, and that's what it's supposed to do. It won't come out, but it will move around. So if you're doing your brake system and your brakes were frozen on your car, let's just say you're doing a car that's been sitting around for a long time, you want to make sure that all this is moving. Take your clips out, clean them up, and you'll be good to go. Okay, here's our rubber seal. See, there's nothing special about it. It's basically a square squeegee is really all it is. Square on this side, square on the inside. Again, if yours has an angled edge, it'll be on the inside here. So you want to be checking for that in your manual. All right, let's put a little bit of grease on there. So, not putting tons and tons on there. Just enough to get it lubed up. And then wiping around the inside. Just to have some lubrication in there so you're not dry metal to metal. And then also your piston shaft. All right, and then push that guy in there. Alright, pretty easy. Just snaps right in. See there. And then smooth out the perimeter there. That's it. That's all it takes. Okay, and then our piston. Lubricate the outside. A little bit of grease on there. Not too much. Just enough so it's got a coating on there. And then that slides right over. Okay, and then getting ready to insert our piston. So this diagram here shows the direction of the rotor coming forward. This is the outside of the brake. This is the inside of the brake. This particular caliper half here, this is the right side inside. So our shim will actually rest near the top there. What I'm doing is just taking a Sharpie and marking this guy here so I get my angles. And then when I put my piston in there, I can just kind of see approximately where that goes as I'm drawing it down in there. That way I'm not fumbling around with the guide all the way through the process. Okay, and then we're drawing it down with a clamp until we're flush here. So piston surface flush with caliper surface here. All right, and then there's one little tip here. So as we're drawing the pistons in, what's happening is we're really forcing the rubber seal to go in this direction. So if we tighten and then let the rubber seal catch up, let it relax, and then tighten, let it relax, tighten, let it relax, it'll draw in. If we try to just draw this down in one fell swoop, it won't go. It'll jam, and you won't get it to go anywhere. You could actually damage putting this in. So a little bit, let the seal relax, a little bit, let the seal relax, and then once you're close, right there, then we're good. Okay, and then taking a little paper towel and denatured alcohol, I'm just really cleaning the boot, make sure I don't have any residual grease on there. Also the hold down clamp, clean that guy, and then you want to get down in here and really clean that out. If you have any residual rubber grease in there, then what's going to happen is when you stretch this over there and try to hold it down, your hold down clamp is going to pull back off. It's always going to want to pull this direction. So that'll help keep everything to stay put. This guy on there. Sometimes these are a little bit of a wrestling match. Get them stretched out. There we go. Okay. Everything in place. All right. Okay, should look like that. And take our hold down ring, starting from the back side and working towards our split pressure wise. So work it towards the front. Alright, that's it. So a little bit of grease on there, that's just going to pop back off of there. Okay, let's put it in the vise, bolt her together. Okay, putting our bolts in. So black oxide, these are new. These usually come with like an oil type sealer on them, and you really want to strip that off. Make sure they're nice and clean, nice squeaky clean. No grease or oils on there at all. Best way to do that, clean it with a soapy solution. I use this stuff called Super Clean, works really, really good. And then a water rinse. That way we can Loctite it, don't have any risk of the Loctite breaking loose. And then I take a little anti-seize lube, just a smidge, and up under the head, just put a little tiny bit. That's all you want on there, just a little bit. And that'll help. When you torque it down, you get a nice smooth torque setting. So thread all our bolts in there. And then I'm going to put my Loctite on here and then put this caliper end on. I'm going to put my Loctite just on the end there, just a drop. Okay, and hopefully thread this guy on here without those coming out. Okay, there you go. And then take our nuts, get them started. Get them started by hand. Finger tight, that's what it should look like. Find a way to put that in the vise without hurting it, and then we'll torque it down. Do all four. And then we're going to set up our torque wrench. Set this guy at about 7 pounds. We'll torque him down 7 pounds first. And then once everything looks good, then we'll go ahead and finish him off at 13 pounds. All right, and then taking her up to 13 pounds. Right there. Right there. And also we'll want to use a wrench underneath there, or a socket, to make sure everything stays put. All right, that's it. Okay, so then moving on to the front brake set. So principle here is basically the same. Only real difference between the front set and the rear set is going to be this crossover canal. On one side of the caliper, you have a little indent there that O-ring sits down inside. And so that just goes in there. We just put that in there dry. No red rubber grease on that guy. And sometimes those kits, they come with these O-rings inside, and sometimes they don't. If for some reason yours doesn't have any in there, this is a part number. Inexpensive. Wouldn't be a bad idea to order those out anyways with your kits, just to make sure you have them so you don't interrupt your work when you're doing your brakes. Also, front brake set, this is the sizes on those, 1.25 pitch by 55 millimeter, and then 50 millimeters here. And the torque setting on those is 24.6 pounds, 10K tensile strength on those. Rear brake bolts were 12K, and the reason that is because they're just a little bit smaller diameter. All right, let me get this torque down and take a look at it. 13. And then finish them off 24.6. Okay, and then putting our bleeder screws in, we're just putting just a smidge of red rubber grease on there, and the reason we're doing that is so when we thread it in there, since everything's been replated, we don't have any galding. We just put those in there and snug them down until they stop. No need to over torque those, so we got to bleed the system. Okay, just until she's snug, we'll stop right there. All right, so last thing we're going to do here then is we're just going to make up the crossover tubes on the rear calipers, and what I'm doing is I'm threading it in one side, getting my bend and my angle started. I'll pull this off, place it in the other side, do the same thing, and then I'll kind of massage it in by hand after that. You can see one here, got one done already. And what I'm doing is I'm just using a brake line kit. This is a copper nickel alloy kit. And how this works, they pre-size these and flare the fittings for us properly. And then they use a number system so that you know which one goes where on the car. And you can also use, to bend those things, you can use like a pipe bending tool, brake line bending tool. This is a little bit big for these particular ones. So these really just need to be massaged gently by hand. And the copper nickel alloy is really easy to bend. Slowly bending it around. Just about there. We're kind of getting our angles. Quite a bit of fooling around with these guys, but you can get it. Main thing is you don't pinch it. If you get too sharp of an angle on there, you know, if you're trying to bend it against something, you'll crease it. So it's really just better to do it by hand if you can do it, or use something to leverage it, like this guy. We're pretty close. All right, we'll go ahead and thread that in there and see what it looks like. All right, let's have a close-up look at our finished product here. So here's our front brake set. What makes these different left to right is going to be the location of the inside bleeder screw on your tops here. So if you have to order a replacement brake caliper, you're going to have to be very specific whether it's a left side or right side for that reason. However, if you're rebuilding your rear brake set, all these parts are interchangeable left or right side. The only thing that makes them different is how you set them up with the crossover tube on the bottom side. One other thing I did is before I assembled these, I masked off the piston area and the mating surfaces and gave them a real good coating of brake caliper clear coat. And the reason I did that is I'm not really sure what's going to happen once I charge this system. Hopefully they stay sealed, we don't have any leakage on anything, but if we do get a little brake fluid running down, that should give us a little extra protection and buy us some time so we don't hurt our finish here. I think they're looking real sharp now, so don't want to do anything to harm that. All right, guys, so if you're doing a brake job on your car, I wish you the best of luck. Those rear brakes, those are going to be tough. Those pistons are really, really tight. Well, thanks for tuning in, and we'll see you on the next video.